3 million pages of evidence, thousands of unsealed flight logs, millions of data points, names, themes, and timelines connected. You are listening to the Epstein Files, the world's first AI-native investigation into the case that traditional journalism simply could not handle.
Welcome back to the Epstein Files. Last time we walked through the staff and tested what the records could actually prove without speculation. Today, we are examining international trafficking and mapping what the documents show about actors, timeline, decisions, and institutional response. As always, every document and source we reference is available at epsteinfiles.fm. So the first record is a 2015 court filing identifying Jean-Luc Brunel's MC2 modeling agency as a pipeline that brought girls from Paris to Epstein's properties in New York and Florida.
And that filing, it really changes the entire scope. Before you see the MC2 documents, it's possible to frame this as just a series of, random opportunistic encounters.
The man who met people at parties or in parks.
Exactly. But the 2015 filing in Ajif v. Maxwell, that anchors the international logistics in an actual corporate structure. It proves it wasn't random.
Right.
Jean-Luc Brunel wasn't just some friend who knew some models. The records describe a procurement system.
The specific allegation in those unsealed documents is that MC2 was used to source young women, and not just from anywhere, but specifically from underprivileged backgrounds in Europe and South America.
And the pitch, the cover story, was always a modeling career.
Which is a critical distinction in trafficking typologies.
It is. You have trafficking by forced kidnapping, physical abduction, but this was trafficking by fraud. The entire mechanism relied on the role of the scout.
We should explain that role, because scout sounds almost benign. It sounds like something from sports.
It's a legitimate role. In the fashion industry, a scout is a gatekeeper. They hold the keys. So if a scout from a major agency like MC2 approaches a 19-year-old, maybe in a difficult economic situation in, say, Eastern Europe, that scout represents a lifeline, a way out.
The documents show Brunel adapted this legitimate business practice for his own purposes.
Precisely. The initial leverage wasn't money, it was access. It was the administrative ability to get a person into the United States. The visa. The Gifford depositions describe this process very clearly. The promise of a work visa was the hook.
The I can get you papers, I can get you to New York promise.
Yes. And that creates an immediate power imbalance, a sense of debt, before the victim has even packed a bag.
So let's trace the physical movement. We have the Epstein flight logs unredacted. When we cross-reference the recruitment dates mentioned in those MC2 filings with the flight logs, a very specific route emerges over and over again.
It's the Paris to Teterboro to Palm Beach pipeline.
Why Teterboro? Why not JFK or Newark?
Teterboro is the primary private aviation hub for New York City. There are no long TSA lines. There are no crowded terminals. You can, drive a car right onto the tarmac.
A layer of opacity.
A significant one. It's built for discretion. The logs show flights originating in Paris, making a stop in Teterboro, and then continuing on to Palm Beach or the U.S. Virgin Islands.
And that last leg of the journey is the most critical one from a trafficking perspective.
It is. The USVIV estate of Jeffrey Epstein complaint analyzes this phase as isolation.
Define that in forensic terms. What does that mean here?
Isolation is the systematic removal of a support network. So you take a young woman from her home in Europe, you fly her to New Jersey, and then you immediately fly her to a private island in the Caribbean.
You've severed her connection to everything she knows.
Everything. She's in a foreign jurisdiction. She likely has no local currency, no transportation. And crucially, the documents show her immigration status, her very right to be in the country, is tied to the person who controls the airplane.
There's a data point in the Epstein flight logs, the ones for the Boeing 727, the so-called Lolita Express. It seems to support this.
The manifests.
Yes, the manifests. We see the arrival of foreign nationals listed, but we often don't see corresponding return flights for them.
And that's the discrepancy. That's what signals trafficking rather than legitimate travel. If you're a model booked for a shoot, the logistics are circular. You fly in, you do the job, you fly out.
But here we see a linear movement.
Entry without a scheduled exit. This corroborates the Jane Doe testimonies. They state that once they were on one of the properties, their freedom of movement was severely restricted. They weren't flying back to Paris for the weekend. They were placed in inventory.
Inventory. That's a chilling term.
It's the language of logistics, of a supply chain. The lack of return flights suggests they were effectively being stockpiled at a destination.
Okay, I want to move to evidence block 2. We've established the planes, the routes. Now we need to look at the documents used to cross the borders. I'm looking at the Jeffrey Epstein bail memorandum. It was filed by the SDNY in July 2019.
A critical document.
It details what the FBI found inside the safe at the East 71st Street mansion.
This is where the facade of the legitimate financier really starts to crack. This is about tradecraft.
The FBI seized a passport. It was issued by Austria. The photograph is clearly Jeffrey Epstein.
But the name is not.
The name is a false identity, and the residence listed on the passport is in Saudi Arabia.
Okay, let's break that down. Just the logistics of that document. Obtaining a fraudulent passport from a Western European nation like Austria, that's not a simple thing.
It's not something you just die on the dark web.
Not a high-quality one, not a biometric Austrian passport. That implies either a very high-level forgery capability or a compromised official somewhere inside the issuing system.
And the Saudi Arabia residence, that detail feels specific, deliberate.
It establishes a legend. That's the term used in intelligence or high-level criminal logistics. It's your cover story.
So what's the story here?
Listing a Saudi residence suggests a specific profile, maybe a private financier involved in oil, sovereign wealth, someone who values extreme privacy. It provides a plausible reason for moving large sums of money or traveling on private charters out of the Middle East. It's a cover story that's printed right into the document itself.
The bail memorandum notes that the passport had an expiration date from the 1980s. The defense team tried to use that.
They did. Their argument was that it was just an old souvenir. They claimed he was a wealthy Jewish man afraid of being kidnapped, and this was some sort of old safety measure he'd forgotten about.
But that argument falls apart when you look closer.
It collapses completely when you look at the stamps. The FBI evidence list notes that this so-called expired passport contained entry and exit stamps from the mid-2000s.
So, to be clear, the passport allegedly expired in 1987, but it has a border stamp from, say, 2006.
Exactly. And you cannot get a legitimate stamp on a passport 20 years after it expires. It's impossible. So one of two things must be true.
One is that the border official was corrupt or, completely incompetent.
And the other, more likely possibility, is that the stamps themselves are forgeries. They were added to the passport after the fact to create a fake travel history.
What's the operational utility of a fake travel history?
It creates a ghost. It allows you to be in two places at once, on paper. If law enforcement ever asks, where were you in May of 2006? You can produce a passport with a stamp showing you were in Riyadh. It's a documented alibi. It obscures your actual location.
This directly contradicts the defense argument that he was just a static financial advisor.
Completely. A financial advisor doesn't need a false identity with a Saudi residence and a doctored travel history to manage accounts. This document proves an operational capability to move across borders outside of any standard tracking system.
It's a contingency plan.
It's a go bag. It's proof he had a mechanism ready to vanish if he needed to.
When we compare the stamps in this Austrian passport with the official unredacted flight logs for his known aircraft, do they line up?
No, there are gaps. Significant gaps. We see periods where Epstein or Maxwell disappear from the FAA-logged flights in the U.S., but the passport stamps suggest movement through Europe or the Middle East during that same time.
This points to dark travel.
Travel that was happening outside the known system, either on commercial flights under that false name or on other private charters not primarily associated with him.
So the records confirm he had the tool, the passport, and the timeline confirms these gaps where he was essentially off the grid.
Correct.
This brings us to the immigration status of the victims themselves. We mentioned the visas earlier. The USVIV estate of Jeffrey Epstein complaint goes into this in forensic detail.
That USVI complaint, it really functions as a detailed audit of systemic immigration fraud.
It specifies that the young women were transported on tourist visas, the B1, B2 class.
We should probably explain what that means. The B1, B2 is the standard visitor visa for the United States. B1 is for temporary business meetings. B2 is for tourism.
And the absolute condition of that visa is that you cannot perform work for a wage.
No skilled or unskilled labor. You cannot be employed. Period.
Yet, the testimony and the estate documents show these women were performing labor, specifically sexual services and massage work, on a schedule for compensation.
Which constitutes a federal immigration violation for every single entry into the country. But it's the frequency that's the tell. The State Department visa records, which are referenced in court filings, show a pattern of multiple entries by the same young women for short durations.
Can you give an example of that pattern from the documents?
Sure. A young woman from, say, France enters the U.S. in January. She stays for 3 weeks. She leaves. She comes back in March. Stays for another 3 weeks. Leaves. She returns again in May.
If you or I tried to do that, if I flew into Heathrow 5 times in 1 year and stayed for 3 weeks at a time with no clear employment record, no return ticket, wouldn't UK Border Force pull me into a secondary screening room?
Without a doubt. In forensic auditing, this is a huge red flag. It fits the classic profile of illegal labor or other illicit activity. A legitimate tourist does not fly to the exact same location 5 times a year for these short repeating stints.
So why was it repeatedly missed? Or was it missed?
The documents suggest it wasn't ignored. It was engineered to get through the system. We found correspondence referenced in the Epstein estate documents that involves immigration attorneys.
So he was paying for lawyers for the victims.
He was paying for legal counsel to ensure these women cleared customs successfully. This creates that veneer of legality we talked about.
How does that work?
You hire an attorney to coach the traveler. The documents imply a script was created. They were told what to say. I'm just visiting a friend. I'm here for a holiday. The attorney's job is to make sure the paperwork appears correct on the surface and the story is consistent.
So the lawyer's function was essentially to help them mislead federal immigration officers.
The lawyer's function was to ensure the trafficking pipeline didn't get blocked at the port of entry. It effectively turns the legal system into a tool for the operation.
The USVI via state filing uses very specific language to reclassify these movements. It stops calling it travel.
Yes, the language shifts to human trafficking and forced labor.
And that distinction is legally crucial for the audit.
It's everything. Travel implies voluntary choice. Trafficking, under the statute, involves the commercial movement of people for prohibited purposes, often using coercion, debt, or fraud. The documents, the visa fraud, combined with victim testimony about having their passports confiscated, prove it was the latter.
Okay, let's widen the map. That's evidence block 4. We've talked about the U.S. side, the Caribbean, but the Giuffre v. Maxwell depositions and the Black Book unredacted. They point to a significant operational infrastructure in Europe.
The London and Paris hubs. These were not just vacation spots.
A Black Book lists an apartment on Avenue Foch in Paris and a townhouse in London.
We need to put those addresses in context. Avenue Foch is not just any street in Paris. It is one of the most exclusive, expensive avenues in the world. It's in the 16th arrondissement. We're talking embassies, billionaires, state-owned residences.
Why does the real estate value matter to a trafficking operation?
It provides protection. It's a shield of prestige. We often imagine trafficking happens in, seedy motels or shipping containers.
Right, in the shadows.
Here, the records show it happened in Belgravia in London and on Avenue Foch in Paris. The documents indicate these locations were used as holding points or transit hubs before the girls were moved to the United States.
It's hiding in plain sight.
It's better than that. It's hiding behind a shield of wealth and power. If you are operating out of a multi-million-dollar apartment on Avenue Foch, the assumption from local law enforcement is that you are a diplomat or a titan of industry. They don't just raid those buildings without overwhelming cause.
The Giuffre depositions are very specific about interactions in London, and this is where high-profile figures like Prince Andrew enter the documented record.
The Giuffre testimony places Prince Andrew at the London townhouse on multiple occasions, and the 2022 out-of-court settlement, while not an admission of guilt, reinforces the credibility of the underlying claim.
And the presence of a royal, a member of the British royal family, that amplifies the shield effect.
It makes the location functionally untouchable. If the Queen of England's son is a frequent guest, the operation gains a level of immunity that a standard criminal enterprise could never achieve.
We have to address some contradictions in the record, though, regarding other high-profile people. There's a document labeled 21-822-122126. It's a denial from Naomi Campbell's representatives about any knowledge of trafficking.
And this is a very important distinction we have to make in a forensic review. We have flight logs. Those logs place numerous high-profile individuals, including Campbell, in proximity to Epstein or physically on his aircraft.
But association is not complicity.
It is not. The Giuffre depositions are detailed. They name specific people as participants in the trafficking mechanism. They name Ghislaine Maxwell. They name Jean-Luc Brunel. They describe specific acts of recruitment and abuse committed by those individuals.
But they don't name Campbell in that context.
The current public release of documents does not contain testimony or evidence proving Naomi Campbell participated in the logistics of the trafficking operation. We have to draw a clear line between those who were, say, on the plane and those who were running the airline.
Understood. The flight log proves physical presence, but it doesn't prove intent or involvement.
Correct.
But the financial records, that's where intent becomes harder to deny. We need to move to evidence block 5, the financial logistics.
The fuel for the entire machine. You cannot move this many people across the Atlantic this many times without a massive and compliant financial infrastructure.
We're looking at Jeffrey Epstein's bank records, the ones released by Representative Jamie Raskin's investigation, and also the filings from the USVI v. JP Morgan lawsuit. The top line number is it's enormous, $1.5 billion in transactions flagged.
$1.5 billion. It's a corporate level cash flow.
And where was that money flowing?
The Senate Finance Committee investigation, it highlighted a consistent pattern of wire transfers to Eastern European banks.
And the data shows specific wires to accounts that have been linked to model recruiters. This ties directly back to the MC2 pipeline we started with.
Exactly. And look at how the payments were labeled. We see payments classified as tuition or rent.
Explain the significance of that.
In money laundering, this is a basic technique. It's called layering or integration. You're giving a legitimate-sounding reason for an illicit payment. You label a payment to a victim or a recruiter as rent to make it look mundane to a bank compliance officer who might be reviewing the wire.
But the pattern itself should have been a red flag.
It absolutely should have been. Why is a single financial advisor in the U.S. Virgin Islands suddenly paying tuition for dozens of young women in Eastern Europe to whom he has no apparent familial connection?
The JP Morgan Suspicious Activity Reports, the SARs, they are referenced repeatedly in the USVI estate complaint.
A SAR is a document a bank is legally required to file with the Treasury Department when they see a transaction that looks like it could be related to a crime. It's the system's alarm bell.
And the SARs noted these consistent, large cash withdrawals. We're talking about amounts between $40,000 and $80,000 per month.
In cash. And cash is the currency of this kind of trafficking. You can't pay a victim with a wire transfer. That creates a permanent traceable record. So you withdraw massive blocks of cash.
The SARs show that JP Morgan saw these withdrawals. They align perfectly with the cash payments described by victims in the Giuffre testimony.
The testimony mentions victims receiving a few $100s here, maybe $1,000 there, always in cash. The bank records verify the source of that cash. It's a direct link.
So the institutional decision-making is really the core finding here. The banks filed the SARs, they flagged the activity, they did their legal duty on paper.
They did. But the documents also prove they did not close the accounts, not until much, much later. The financial plumbing of a multinational trafficking operation was visible to their own compliance officers. It was recorded. And the decision was made repeatedly to keep the client and his accounts active.
So we have the recruitment routes, the fraudulent passports, the visa abuse, the high-prestige real estate, and the financial pipeline. Now we have to address the Cluster 6 documents. This is the material that deals with claims of intelligence operations and coercion.
And this is where we have to apply the absolute strictest source discipline. There is a lot of assertion here, and we need to separate that from documented evidence.
We have sources in the archive with titles like Israeli Sex Island and U.S. Capture and FBI Phase 1 Jeffrey Epstein Declassified. We also see these claims in a file called Red Pills of Zion. These documents allege that the entire trafficking ring was actually a state-sponsored intelligence operation, specifically linking it to Mossad.
We see these claims repeated. The Israeli Sex Island text, for example, asserts this was a honey trap operation. It explicitly links Epstein back to Robert Maxwell and claims the island was a platform for creating compromat.
Okay, but now we have to apply the source integrity lock. Do we have any official government document, a DOJ filing, an unredacted FBI memo, a State Department cable that confirms Jeffrey Epstein was a registered or active intelligence asset for any country?
We don't have documentation for that.
Let me be very clear. We have the FBI Phase 1 files. They contain thousands of pages, interviews, flight logs, evidence inventories.
Yes, a massive data set. But they do not contain a classified intelligence briefing or any kind of directive that states Epstein was working for Israeli or U.S. intelligence.
Some of these sources make the argument based on Robert Maxwell's known history with intelligence services.
And that's a separate evidentiary track.
Yeah.
The connection is made by inference. The logic is Robert Maxwell had intelligence ties, Ghislaine is his daughter, therefore the Epstein operation must be an extension of that work. That is a logical inference, but it is not a documented fact within the Epstein case files that have been released by the Department of Justice.
What about the blackmail tapes? The entire concept of a honey trap relies on the existence of recordings. We have the FBI raid evidence list from the bail memorandum. It lists what was seized from the house.
Correct. It lists numerous hard drives, CDs, and loose tapes. The hardware was there.
But does it list a specific verified video file of, for example, a sitting politician engaged in a sexual act?
The public record does not currently contain that. We do not have a verified video file of a specific target being recorded for blackmail purposes in the publicly available evidence.
But victim testimony, like in the Jeffrey depositions, describes the presence of cameras everywhere.
Yes. Victim testimony absolutely describes a pervasive surveillance environment. Victims saw cameras. The FBI raid inventory confirms the seizure of the recording hardware. So we have the capability documented.
But not the product.
We do not have the final product in the public file. We know the system existed to record people. We do not have the actual recordings themselves in the unsealed evidence logs.
So, to summarize the intelligence claim, the source material we have alleges an intelligence operation, but the official record from law enforcement neither confirms nor denies it. It's simply silent on the matter.
That's correct. The official record treats this as a criminal sex trafficking conspiracy. The intelligence angle remains, from the perspective of a forensic audit of these specific files, unproven.
Let's synthesize everything we've mapped out today. Let's walk through the logistics one more time. It started with recruitment.
Recruitment through Jean-Luc Brunel and the MC2 agency in Paris. A structured pipeline, not random encounters, using a legitimate business as a front.
Then came the transport.
Private aircraft. The flight logs document the primary routes: Paris, Teterboro, Palm Beach, the USVI. And the key data point is the absence of return flights, which suggests an inventory model.
The border crossing itself.
Facilitated by systemic visa fraud, as detailed in the USVI complaint. B1, B2 tourist visas used for illegal labor, with travelers coached by attorneys paid for by Epstein.
Then there's the identity obfuscation.
The Austrian passport. That's the hard proof of a capability to move undetected under a false identity with a sophisticated, pre-built cover story.
And finally, the funding that made it all possible.
High-volume cash withdrawals and targeted wire transfers, primarily to Eastern Europe. All of it was flagged in suspicious activity reports by the banks, but the activity was allowed to continue for years.
When you lay out that entire list, what does it tell you about the nature of this crime?
That this was not a crime of passion. It wasn't just a series of impulsive acts by one wealthy, deviant man. The records prove the existence of a bureaucratic, multinational corporate structure.
A corporation designed to move human beings.
Yes. It had a procurement department, which was MC2. It had a logistics and transportation department, the flight crews and schedulers. It had a legal department with the immigration attorneys. And it had a finance department handling the cash and wires.
And the institutional response from the outside world.
The institutional response from the State Department that issued the visas to the major banks that processed the funds was one of recorded discrepancy followed by sustained inaction. The systems that are designed to catch exactly this kind of activity, customs, bank compliance officers, the SAR system, they all triggered. The red lights were flashing on the dashboard, but no one stopped the machine.
The records confirm the routes, the funding, and the failure of oversight. We know the how. What remains redacted is the full extent of the who, specifically regarding the intelligence claims, which remain legally unverified in this dataset. Next time, the cover-up.
You have just heard an analysis of the official record. Every claim, name, and date mentioned in this episode is backed by primary source documents. You can view the original files for yourself at epsteinfiles.fm. If you value this data-first approach to journalism, please leave a 5-star review wherever you're listening right now. It helps keep this investigation visible. We'll see you in the next file.